It's another Football Friday on NewsOK Live. I'm Mike Sherman, being joined by our NewsOK and the Oklahoman coverage team from all over the globe. Actually, they've congregated now in Dallas, Texas, where tonight in Arlington they'll cover the OSU Missouri game in the Cotton Bowl. Joining us from Gina Mizell's hotel room, our OU beat writer Ryan Aber. Joining us from Gina Mizell's hotel room, our OSU beat writer Gina Mizell, and joining us from his hotel room in Dallas is columnist Barry Trammell. Barry and Ryan are fresh from New Orleans, where last night they covered OU's big win over Alabama, 45-31 in the Sugar Bowl. And Barry, let's start there. Is it possible that this is OU's best win since the national championship game against Florida State?
Yeah, it probably is. I mean, we might come up with one that could match it, but just the monumentalness of the win and the setting and the the comeback nature of this Sooner team, where at halftime against Iowa State, or 2 minutes left in the first half against Iowa State, you think they're going to lose to the Cyclones, and since then they've been a terror. And the future looks fabulous now. They found a quarterback. They found their mojo. Got a bunch of young players returning, so all is well in Soonerland.
Well, we got OSU and OU coverage team here all together. Let's ponder this possibility for a second. It was raised by our good friend Owen Canfield, editorial writer for the Oklahoman, who just a minute ago, as I was walking in the studio, proposed this. If Justin Gilbert holds on to that interception, if LaColton Bester does not rake it from his grasp, today OSU would be coming off a Fiesta Bowl game against the University of Central Florida, and OU would be sitting on perhaps a win in the Alamo Bowl. Now, today, OU fans are thinking, we're back, baby, back in the national championship run. Gina, what's your view of that scenario?
Yeah, certainly interesting. And I mean, a lot of people thought that when Oklahoma State would play in the Fiesta Bowl and they play Central Florida, they're like, that would not be a great game. And then you see what UCF came out and did to Baylor. So, yeah, these bowl games have been really interesting, and it's just very fascinating to see how a big win or a bad performance can kind of propel you into the whole mindset of next season. And we've certainly seen that with a couple of games so far.
Barry, the Bedlam game coming down to Justin Gilbert, whether he can hold on there, and how this all is flipped around. You've covered a lot of Oklahoma football. Have you ever seen a season like this where, as you said, you told us about the scenario at Iowa State, how things flipped around so dramatically at the end?
Well, the parallels aren't all. Certainly in '75, the Sooners were reeling. They had lost to Kansas, first loss in 30-something games, and then went to Missouri and played bad. And then at the end of the game, Joe Washington rescued Oklahoma with a 71-yard run and then a 2-point conversion. Next week, they go and beat Nebraska. They go then to play in the Orange Bowl and beat Michigan and win the national championship. So some similarities there, but that was all along thought to be a great Oklahoma team that just had a bad game. This was never thought to be a great Oklahoma team. Had a few bad games. But, if Justin Gilbert picks off that pass, I think we're still sitting in Dallas waiting for OU to play Missouri in the Cotton. I think the Sugar, after being in New Orleans, I'm convinced the Sugar was going to take Baylor in that scenario. That would have lifted OU up to the Cotton to play Missouri, but clearly the Sooners would not have been in the same mind frame that they are now. Now they're coming off 3 great wins, none of them at home, and feeling really good about themselves, which they should.
Barry, let's talk about one more second looking ahead, and then we'll go back and talk about some of the big plays that made the game last night. But you talked about the view ahead. 2014 now is an incredibly eagerly anticipated season for the Sooners. They bring back a quarterback who slayed the Alabama Giant, 4 touchdown passes in a bowl game, never done before by an Oklahoma quarterback. They bring back a lot of defenders who menaced Alabama and harassed A.J. McCarron. They enter probably a top 5 team or higher into the first season of a college football bowl game, and they have perhaps the hottest college football coaching property right now. Is it possible for anybody to be hotter than Bob Stoops? Does this sound at all like 2009, or does it even sound like a more eagerly anticipated season than that one with Sammy B coming back?
Well, I don't think it's more anticipated because Bradford was such a great commodity. Had won the Heisman Trophy, but I do think the Sooners are very hot right now, a hot commodity. Now, whoever wins the Big Bowl, I think is going to be the hottest coaching property in America, Jimbo Fisher or Gus Malzahn. But clearly, Stoops' arrow is pointing way up again, and the fact that he found a quarterback. All year we knew that Oklahoma was going to be good next season because of the young defenders, because of the young or some returning offensive linemen, Sterling Shepard, some playmakers returning, but you just didn't know about the quarterback, and all of a sudden they had Aaron Rodgers playing last night. So, if you put a quarterback on this team, you knew that 2014 was going to be special.
Ryan Aber, are you still there with us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ryan, can you talk about what you've seen from Trevor Knight over the course of this season and what you saw from him last night?
I mean, all season we hadn't seen anything like last night. We knew he could run. We knew he could do the zone read and the read option stuff. But the way he threw last night was incredible. Like Barry said, it was like you're watching Aaron Rodgers or one of those NFL quarterbacks out there. He was going through his reads in a completely different way than he had all season, making the right choices, and it was just an unbelievable transformation. This is the Trevor Knight that Bob Stoops had told us about all year and telling us that we weren't seeing in practice every day and weren't sure whether to believe him or not, but apparently he was right.
Barry, a couple things about Trevor Knight's performance. Sort of a pitch and catch game. If you look at the stats against this kind of Alabama defense, it almost seems crazy, his completion percentage. I think, 32 of 44 or something like that, 4 touchdowns. But it seemed to me, Barry, early in that game, there was some tough catches made by the likes of Jalen Saunders, by Sterling Shepard, passes over the middle that receivers hung on to and got hit and punished. What role did those play in the confidence of Trevor Knight last night?
Well, I mean, I think they've got to help. You're right. The receivers were excellent. Now, Jazz Reynolds, he dropped the easiest pass all night. He dropped. But Saunders was excellent on some tough catches. Colton Bester made a couple of excellent plays. Shepard going across the middle. Derek Woods gets thrown into the game and makes a leaping catch. So if you got good receivers, your quarterback's going to get fired up, and OU will miss Saunders. I mean, he ended up being their number one playmaker down the stretch. However, Sterling Shepard looks like a star in the making, and some of these younger guys, can step up and be the new Saunders. Is the opportunity awaiting them? So. I think the future is very bright. If this whole thing makes you wonder how good Trevor Knight would be if he had played the entire year, because he's still he's made, what is it, Ryan, 5 starts now or whatever it is. The guy has just not started too many football games. He's only played 3 complete games, so he's still a very young player. He's going to get better and better, and that should be very exciting for the Sooners.
Last year, the bowl season inspired quotes from the Sooner players about how he was doing a great job of imitating Johnny Manziel. This year, the bowl season, that month of extra practices actually made him look like the real deal. Ryan Aber, as you look back, of course, Trevor Knight was the star of Stage and Screen last night, the star of our paper. Great headline idea. Barry, you were among the many people who came up with What a Night. We put Oh What a Night. I've had Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons in my head all night, all morning. Not necessarily a bad thing for old guys like you and me, but we know Trevor Knight was a star, Ryan. But can you think of some unsung people from that, unsung heroes from the Sooners' big win over Alabama last night that stand out?
Well, I think you've got to start on the offensive line with all the shifting that they did with Darrell Williams moving over into that spot on the left side to protecting the Trevor Knight's backside. Just did a fantastic job all night. We thought that would be an area where Alabama would really give OU fits, but the Crimson Tide only got to Knight once all night. And on the other side, OU got to A.J. McCarron 7 times. And then you look on the defensive side, I think Jordan Wade in the middle, Tapper and Stryker got a lot of attention last night, and absolutely, or Geno Grissom and Stryker got a lot of attention last night, and deservedly so. But Wade did a good job of plugging up the middle and not allowing them to make plays right there.
Barry, who's your unsung hero from the game last night?
Ooh, unsung hero. I think was the unsung hero because it didn't go well for him. I think it's Zach Sanchez. He had a rough first quarter. He gave up some couple of long plays, was getting picked on, was not very physical, but he made by the second quarter he was starting to play one of the biggest plays of the game. Amari Cooper got behind him on a deep ball. McCarron put it right there, and somehow Sanchez got back and got a finger on it and tipped it. And then by the late second quarter, he intercepts and takes it almost to the house to really shift the momentum. The longer the game went, the less effective was Alabama's passing game, and it was killer early. And part of that was the pass rush, which was phenomenal. But I thought Zach Sanchez grew up a bunch in that game last night.
A couple guys who are not unsung, the coordinators. The praises of Josh Heupel and Mike Stoops were being sang from the highest mountaintop in Oklahoma last night. Quite a big difference for what was being said about Heupel, of course, after the OU-Texas game. We're bringing Jenny Carlson into the conversation. She was here in Oklahoma City watching the game on television, and I'd like all of your opinions on this. Who had a better night, Heupel or Mike Stoops?
Well, if you're starting with me, I'll go with Mike Stoops. I thought that Alabama's offensive line would exploit an area that, we felt like was a weak link for the Sooners, even from the beginning of the season, that being their defensive line. But that wasn't the case at all. Alabama's big guys, just the weight and the size that they threw out there on that offensive line, that didn't become a factor in that game ultimately. The Sooners were able to get pressure, to get to McCarron, to not let the run game become dominant. So I think Mike Stoops did an amazing job because I think that Alabama had the talent to really dominate on the offensive side of the ball, and that never happened.
Ryan, who had a better night, Heupel or Mike Stoops?
I've got to go with Josh Heupel. I mean, Mike Stoops had a fantastic night, don't get me wrong, but Josh Heupel, there's been so much talk about his play calling, his game planning all year, and last night goes with some completely different looks. We hadn't seen Trevor Knight throw some of those short little pigeon catch passes a lot this year. He was able to do that, get in a rhythm very quickly, and they also took advantage of some players that we haven't seen much. Barry mentioned Derek Woods, who we saw make a big catch. 2 tight ends last night caught catches. The Sooners had only had 1 completion to a tight end all year, and that's been part of the criticism for him. But Taylor McNamara and Brandon Green both came up with catches. I think for the creativity of the game plan and how well it worked, I've got to go with Josh Heupel.
How about you, Gina? You were watching it like the rest of us. Who had the better night?
I got to go with Heupel as well, just because I don't think any of us sorry, I'm muted. There we go. I got to go with Heupel as well, just based on the fact that I don't think any of us saw this coming out of Trevor Knight. I mean, we were all talking about who was going to start the bowl game, if it was going to be Knight or going to be Blake Bell, and it sounds like based on pregame warm-ups, maybe both of them were taking some snaps with the first team and that sort of thing. But Knight obviously came out and played so well that that obviously wasn't needed. So I'm going to go with Heupel just based on all the heat that he's taken. I mean, Mike Stoops, we know he's a good defensive coordinator and has done some really solid things. And so I thought the way the defensive line played and made some big plays on McCarron, I thought was really, really impressive. Obviously made the huge play at the end to seal it. But just based on sheer criticism and what he's gone through this year, I think Josh Heupel came up with a big-time game plan and got his quarterback in particular ready to play in the biggest game of the season.
Barry, Colin Cowherd on his radio show today made a big deal about OU's no huddle. Talked about how it took away, and Todd Blackledge made the same point during the broadcast last night, how it took away one of Alabama's biggest assets, which is pre-snap adjustments, between plays adjustments on defense, getting their team in the right alignment to stop the upcoming play. Said credited their no huddle with that. But then there was also the wrinkle by Mike Stoops, which Colin Cowherd also pointed out. He talked about the speed and intensity with which OU's defense played. It reminded me in some ways of that 2000 National Championship game. Just they all played like they were shot out of a cannon. Eric Stryker especially going up against Quanjo, the Alabama left tackle. Which of those two innovations was best, and which of those two coordinators had the better night?
Well, I mean, I tell you, I think if I was going to gauge the coordinators, I think Heupel had the better first half. Mike Stoops had the better second half. Yeah, the OU defense was great last night. They also gave up 31 points and were getting lit up in the first half. Now, they stayed in there and fighting and got their feet under them in the second half. Meanwhile, in the first half, Josh Heupel was getting guys doing all kinds of things. I loved his shifting. You know, it wasn't the no huddle. It was the up tempo that got Alabama. A lot of teams don't huddle, but OU played the really quick up tempo at times. That did Josh Heupel. Pulled out the biggest trick of all, which was, and I'm sure they were just sitting in there discussing what they were going to read after the game because they never huddle. But in the second half, that's when Mike Stoops really four straight punts to open the third quarter. Mike's bringing the blitz. And what I found interesting was this. They wore down the Alabama offensive line to the point on that last drive when Alabama fumbled, when Stryker sacked McCarron, Grissom picks up. That was not a blitz. Just the four-man front got to McCarron pretty quickly. So I think Heupel was great in the first half. Mike Stoops great in the second half.
Guys, let's segue to the OSU-Missouri game tonight at the Cotton Bowl. In the Cotton Bowl at Jerry's World. You guys will all be there. But I also want to take you back to our preseason cover, SECopoly. You know what? We have a lot of preseason previews, a lot of football sections, a lot of advances that don't really pan out. The themes don't hold up past week one. This one, however, seems alive and well. In fact, if we could have just cropped out Les Miles and put Gary Pinkel there at the Monopoly table, we'd have had it. Now Bob Stoops looks like he's overturning the table rather than Saban's cash flow knocking it over. My question about OSU Missouri is this: what if any impact, does OU Alabama have on tonight's game? How about you, Jenny?
I don't know if it has a huge impact, but I do think that it sort of says to Oklahoma State players that, Oklahoma did it, and it's sort of I think it maybe gives them a little more pep in their step. But at the same time, I think Oklahoma State, from everything Gina and I have heard all week, I think they feel good about this matchup. Obviously, Missouri's very talented. They've got a great quarterback. They've got great wide receivers. They've got great defensive ends. I mean, they've got some serious talent on this team. But I think Oklahoma State feels good about the matchup. But, you can't help but see Alabama, the team that everybody says is the greatest of all time, getting beat by a team that you were right with. And, most people think you were going to beat before the game. To see that how OU dominated, that's got to at least give Oklahoma State, sort of a little more pep, like I said.
Gina, we'll go to the matchups. You guys have written a lot about a lot of matchups. Jenny had a column today on Desmond Rowland against that Missouri defense and how Desmond Rowland saw what Missouri was able to do against Auburn and running the football and thinking about what Auburn was able to do against Missouri, running the football. Of course, that Auburn team is the national championship game. OSU will try to do the same. What to you is the most important matchup on the outcome of tonight's game?
Well, I think the most exciting individual matchup is Justin Gilbert versus Dorial Green Beckham. Just if you're talking sheer physical ability versus sheer physical ability, Green Beckham is 6'6", 225, and Justin Gilbert obviously a Thorpe Award finalist. But I think the most maybe underrated, but what might decide this game is Oklahoma State's offensive line versus those defensive ends. It's Michael Sam, unanimous All-American, SEC Defensive Player of the Year, obviously in a league that plays quite a bit of defense. There has a lot of defensive playmakers, and Coney Ely's on the other side, and he's had a great season as well. And even they've got some other guys that they rotate in there that have made some big plays. But OSU's offensive line, after all the heat they took in the beginning of the season, all the shuffling they had to do after Devin Davis went out with a torn ACL and missed the season, they really stabilized during the second half of the season and have really protected the quarterback well all season long. They rank very, very highly in number of sacks allowed. So if they can protect Clint Shelf, if Clint Shelf can be aware and move well around in the pocket and still deliver the ball accurately, then I think that's going to go a long way in this ball game. So yeah, maybe not the most exciting matchup to talk about, but I think that's going to be a big player in this game.
Barry,
Gina and I had a conversation actually with Dave Matter, whose name you've probably seen in our newspaper. He covers Missouri for the Post-Dispatch, about that defensive line in the SEC championship game. And he said because of the way that the Auburn offensive line was able to get push and the way that they were able to run the ball, they were able basically to take Missouri's defensive ends out of the game. They didn't allow the pass rush because they weren't passing the ball. And those defensive ends, where they really get pressure, is with the pass rush. So the D tackles, he said, are okay, but not as great as those defensive ends. So that's where, if Oklahoma State's offensive line can really attack the center of that Missouri defensive line, maybe that's where they see a weak spot and they can attack that in the offense.
Barry, OSU gets to make the closing statement for the Big 12 in the whole SEC-opoly argument. The Cowboys, of course, have sat in their hotel rooms, presumably, or somewhere. They've had an opportunity to watch OU beat Alabama. They've had an opportunity to watch the Baylor team that they handled at home lose to University of Central Florida in a Fiesta Bowl that OSU could have been playing in. Do you give any stock, or do you put any credence into the psychology of what OSU, of the what-ifs that might be dancing in OSU's head tonight as they get ready to take the field against Missouri?
Well, if there are any, they were mitigated by the Sugar Bowl. If you sit there, when I watched the Fiesta Bowl, I went to bed that night saying the Big 12 stinks. This is the Big 12 champion. I mean, that was awful. No offense, Vinegar Bend, but your alma mater for about 40.
They were bad. I'll say that. Barry's cutting out, but the ASU played bad in the Holiday Bowl.
Hoping to get Barry unfrozen here. He was in the middle of a great point. Of course, the OU Alabama game, as Barry was saying, sort of mitigates the bad taste left in the Big 12's mouth after.
I think it works both ways.
No.
Here he comes.
If they watched Baylor, I think OSU still you. They thought, hey, we should have beat this team. So I'm.
Here we go, guys. Let's wind it up here. Bob Stoops talked about the Cleveland Browns today on the Dan Patrick Show, and again on the Colin Cowherd Show. Ryan Aber, do you put any stock do you put any stock at all in the Stoops to Cleveland talk?
I think you've got to consider it a little bit because of his roots there, and you wonder if maybe this is the time for him to make a step up and take that challenge in the NFL. But I've got to think with the quarterback situation at both places, you don't know who your quarterback's in Cleveland. You finally feel like you found one in Norman. I think maybe he passes yet again on the Cleveland Browns job.
Jenny Carlson, Art Briles today said he's not interested in any other jobs. He's staying at Baylor, is happy there. Is it possible that he is making that statement because Jim Mora Jr. has emerged as the leading candidate at Texas? Or is it also possible that now Nick Saban comes back into the picture?
I don't know. As I was driving down to Dallas today, I got a chance to listen to some local talk radio, and this Texas job situation seems ever changing. It seems like there's about a bazillion big-time donors that want to have some sort of say-so, and now I guess Red McCombs is trying to push and get a guy in there. So I don't know. I mean, to me, it seems like Jim Mora might be a guy that, because of Steve Patterson's because of his Pac-12 roots, maybe that becomes a guy that he's seen a little more up close and personal and likes. But I guess I'm not super excited about Jim Mora. I mean, maybe he'll be good at Texas, but that doesn't really fire me up. Maybe it fires up Texas people. I don't know, but that doesn't seem like a great get to me. So I don't know. I think Bryles still has to be in the mix. How can you not see what they've done, their overall body of work at Baylor, and not say that he could be a good recruiter, a good coach at Texas? So we'll see. I don't know what this all means, but it's not over, and I think it's going to be fun to see how it does come to completion.
Gina, time to cross Gundy off the Texas list, or if we do it, should we do it only in pencil?
I think right now, yes, based on who they've already interviewed. Sounds like from other reports that they've talked to Charlie Strong, they've talked to James Franklin. Obviously, it sounds like they've reached out to some of these other, big-time candidates. So unless those types of guys also proclaim via Twitter or via whatever that they're staying at their respective schools, then maybe you start to see Texas kind of go down the list. And I think Mike Gundy would be in that second tier of coaches they would go after. But it's been pretty quiet on that front. I mean, Jenny wrote about earlier this week that he hasn't exactly denied interest in the job, but at least at this point, it sounds like Texas really isn't all that interested in him, at least at this point. So he's not in that top group of candidates, but maybe if all these guys get extensions at their schools and decide to stay, then maybe his name will surface a little bit more.
Guys, that's going to be all for this edition of the Football Friday Hangout on NewsOK Live. Appreciate all your content, all your stories, all your engagement with our readers throughout the college football season. And, of course, you can stay with the best coverage team every day at NewsOK and every morning in the Oklahoman. Enjoy the game tonight, guys.